Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the fall. Let's see, I just threw my keyboard and apparently that registered as hitting the forward button. Well, I guess that works just as well as anything else. We're going to try and do the director's commentary and see if we can get some more entertainment after this out of this game. Which in all honesty, it's half a game, we know now, because it ends at a cliffhanger. Half of the abilities that they tease are not in the game. Basically all of the movement abilities that would potentially fix the clunky movement of the game as it starts would be probably improved, if not completely even removed as complaints if these movement abilities were actually in this game. So I guess the real question to take from this is, you see, like, there's a graveyard in the back there, there's a headstone, so it hints in the very first scene that the human pilot is dead or missing completely, if there ever was a human pilot. But yeah, we are basically assuming that everything we saw is somewhat the same.
Primary objective: save my pilot.
Like, this could be totally a lie, though.
Accessing on-suit logs. Mission parameters and location data not found.
I guess the question to ask here certainly is going to be would there be different options here?
Weapon rendered inoperable from the impact. Consulting parameters.
See, if you're gonna make a suit that is designed to allow you to just jump through the space, seems kind of ridiculous that your shields might hurt the human pilot, or your weapon might break. It just doesn't seem like that makes any sense at all. We're inherently trying to also kind of have a chance of maybe responding differently, but I don't suspect there is going to be much of a different response for a lot of these puzzles, so we'll just be like to pick up the dialogue options. If there's a totally secondary way to play this game, I just kind of question whether we could. So these bioluminescent insects do show up earlier in the game, I suppose. Which I guess there's something interesting around that, but maybe not that much interesting. It really is just like a half of a game that they're selling here. I guess the idea here is you needed somebody that had technology similar to your own technology to get the cloaking pattern, which at least that's the thought that I think the game has. We can't gather the blood early. Also didn't check to see how many achievements perhaps are in this game, so I might end up running around and doing a third playthrough just to get like one missed achievement.
I require access to my onboard camouflage. Attempting internal activation.
Yeah, you would almost want a New Game Plus where you could activate all of your abilities to start with, but I don't know if that really means anything. So yeah, through this half game that ends on a cliffhanger, you get a network interface that you use basically twice in the whole game. Camouflage, which you can use more freely, but only really need to use once. And then you don't get thrusters, you don't get power assisted movement or motion accelerating, and you never get the health monitor. So yeah. And what's funny, I guess, is there's probably not even a guarantee in the next game, knowing how this game ends, that you ever would get power assisted movement or thrusters.
Subsystem access requires. If I could find a way to bypass the lockout, I could override the access protocols myself.
So this is like just a first glitch, and it just doesn't seem like there's any real reason. Let me see if the developer's commentary is on. No. That's what I thought. Because we should have seen something to start with. Yep. And we'll try and burn through this all fairly quickly as far as the developer's commentary. I bet while there are a lot here, I bet not too much of it is anything too interesting. So let's just start here with this one.
Hello and welcome to the developer commentary for The Fall. I'm the games director, John Warner.
I'm the writer. My name is Caleb Allard.
We both put a lot of love into the project. It's sort of our baby, so have fun, and we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, that's not really
when I
good
The Fall,
commentary.
I was really inspired to make a game that was really focused around exploration. I've played other games, obviously, that have a lot of exploration, Metroid Prime being a really good example, but most of the gameplay revolves around platforming and shooting and that kind of stuff, which is fun. There's nothing wrong with it. But I was really inspired to make a game where players had to pay attention and players had to read, and that was the central thing that really moved the gameplay forward.
Well, arguably, I'd say then you're going to lose a lot of your audience if you have to wander around back and forth and have to read. There isn't even a ton of reading in here. I've seen way worse games that really force a player to read, or you're just going to be lost or have a really bad experience. But this game is particularly bad about going back and forth. And it's not really exploration, because at the core of it, if this was an exploration game, comparing themselves to Metroid Prime, which is a stupid comparison for them to make, because this is no Metroid Prime by any means, and in all fairness, Metroid Prime without the shooting and platforming would be kind of a boring game anyways, but Metroid Prime is mostly well lit and colorful and 3D with lots of different unique and interesting things to look at. This game is 90% black. It barely even is a game I should have ever purchased and played, because it has what I call the dark screenshot syndrome so bad. So yeah, with even brightness turned up to the maximum, this really can't be an exploration game that's enjoyable. It can only be an exploration game where you're wandering, looking for the next button to find. It becomes more like a hidden object
So
game.
here we see our first glimpse of our friend here, the caretaker, who's stalking you.
Yeah, our dear friend, the caretaker.
We
This is kind of
assume
our
there's
first
only
mystery.
one caretaker in
Yeah,
this
so
game.
The Fall is very much about mystery because it's about exploration.
Right.
And so those two things go hand in hand. And we want to compel the players forward with the mystery. And we want to give them solid answers to that as rewards as they're going along.
Because if we don't, then it just becomes this endless drudge through unanswered questions forever.
Yeah, like a
That's
rabbit
like
hole.
I hate that more than anything else.
Oh my goodness.
Something I wanted to stay away from in The Fall is when you have like really, really compartmentalized question and answer. And there are game formats where that's appropriate, but you have a question in front of you and then you figure out the answer. Done, wrapped, shipped. Move on to the next one. We really wanted to create an environment where the mystery would unfold and you would get an understanding, and that would give you a better foundation in the world.
To open up more mystery.
or the mystery that you've solved would take on a new form, a new meaning. This guy here, obviously, if we figure out who he is relatively quickly, but there are other bigger mysteries. The other ARID on the cross, who are they, why are they there? Where is Joseph's? What is or isn't really wrong with ARID? Some of these things will be revealed later, of course, in the upcoming parts.
Parts, not even upcoming sequel. They want to do multiple parts of this game. And boy, is that just like them saying, we don't want to leave you hanging on a mystery, and then they sell this game. I mean, they are so out of line from what the product they actually delivered is. It's insane. And to have two developer commentaries where, for lack of a more subtle phrase, the creators are so up their butts with their own heads that they can't even tell that the product they delivered in no way parallels the product they wanted to deliver. That's a real shame.
We started the Fallout in a cave actually long before I even knew it was going to be the Fall or who the protagonist was. The game actually started as a painting. So it really kind of started about feelings more than anything else, and it came into a more cohesive story as we started exploring, who the character was and what we wanted to do, and we really just kind of started connecting dots. Every game up until now, I've always wanted to have this really complex idea and make this interesting thing, but this is the first thing that I've ever made, or worked on at least, where I didn't have any idea what I was doing at the beginning, and I just started with a painting. And I think starting in a more intuitive, unconscious place, with working with feelings, is probably a good place to start with a project.
And then once you get that feeling out there where you can stick your fingers into it like pudding, then you can start analyzing it.
Right.
And making rational, logical connections between what your gut was telling you wanted to play in.
Well, yeah, I'm going to probably disagree with almost every developer commentary here. I can't say that inherently is a wrong way to go about the creative process, to start with almost a dreamlike experience, or the idea of a painting, having a crucified cross in a cave. But they talk about character, and the player's character here, ARID, it's a robot. It just doesn't really have any character. Maybe it's just a little bit right at the end, but at the beginning, we kind of know nothing about this character.
Another ARID, who is effectively a mirror for us. Even your little avatar picture, but cracked, damaged, and as a mirror, it evokes incredible danger. That has the exact same capacities as me. That could be me.
But he's kind of ARID's opposite in another way.
He is so broken physically, but he's functioning perfectly internally in terms of his willingness to follow the rules, his willingness to be depurposed.
In fact, you've said before that he's the most functional character in the game.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. He is the one who's working right. He was voiced by Lee Majub, who also actually did the army bots, and that was how he explained it to Lee. Though we were wanting to play with a lot of oppression symbolism with women, ARID has this female voice, there's domestication in the kitchen, stuff like that. We didn't want to say that it's a story about the oppression of women happening in Robotland. So we're like, let's give him a male voice so that we can show that it's something beyond that we're using that as a symbolism.
Yeah, I don't even know. I didn't see anything about impression of women in this game at all. I think that's something that either went over my head completely or is just not really there.
In one of its early incarnations, The Fall was more about a deep analysis of what rigidity looks like. One of the ideas that anytime you've got a system that's really rigid and really limited, you tend to have these loopholes that people use that allow them to stick with their rigid system but also give them access to what's outside that system. And of course, as the story progresses, we find out that The Fall is sort of more about a general...
Less about supporting the system by using the loopholes, and the system begins to deconstruct because of the loopholes.
Yeah, you got it, exactly. One of the things I've really been interested in for a long time is how story and gameplay interact. So the goal with The Fall, and probably the number one goal with The Fall actually, was to create puzzles in a way that caused players to think in a way that kind of opened their mind up for the story. By putting them in a position where they're forced to find loopholes in the system that we provide them, then theoretically they should have a felt, almost tactile experience of what we then want to explore with the story.
I will say the puzzle game series, the puzzle game called The Witness, it's not a series, breaks the idea of breaking outside of a system in a much more impactful way than these puzzles do. I think part of the problem, I would say, with this developer commentary is that you have two creators who are basically patting each other on the back, when perhaps in a developer commentary there really should just be one person explaining an aspect that they really are familiar about the game, something they worked on really hard with. So you can have like 4 or 5 people who worked on different aspects of the game, and each of them having a story to tell about how they developed something. But everybody else around the table needs to be kind of like, oh, that's interesting, yes, great. Which is slightly different from having people around the table going, yes, that's exactly right, that's perfect, that's genius. It's just a little too enthusiastic, and where it needs to be a little bit more passive.
This elevator test actually went through several iterations to get it to the point where people could generally figure out they needed to hop off and head down below. The water pipe, as well as the removal of a ground plane that used to be there when the elevator moved, and then finally the addition of the rat, were all things that we added to sort of give hints that the player could actually get off the elevator and head down. Ultimately, I kind of like the test because it's one of the first times that the players got to break an expectation, which is something that we tried to work throughout the fall in lots of different places.
I'll grant them that. Like, I don't have to be critical of every statement. Like, that it is a pretty decent puzzle. I would probably want to see maybe some flashing lights or a counting down to imply some action. If you really don't even need flashing lights, you just need the audio to say elevator lifting going up in 3, 2, 1. Just having that countdown will probably give a lot of players a subconscious idea of, well, you said up, maybe there's a down, and you might even add a line of dialogue that says elevator can only go down at the moment downward momentum blocked. Lift will begin moving in 3, 2, 1. By having that little count, even though that would make a bit of a delay, that tells the player maybe there's something time-based around the actions. Most of the other puzzles in this game, not really time-based.
It's pretty important that we got lighting in the fall to look right. To that end, ARID's flashlight is actually composed of 3 separate spotlights that are turned on and off based on which direction she's facing. This allows us to have control over how the objects in the near foreground and background are lit, so that we can give objects the illusion that they appear on the same plane as ARID without having them crash through her body awkwardly as she walks past.
It's kind of funny that you would even have to do that. But I guess that's the way they programmed it, and I can't say that's the weirdest way to program something. So there's a spotlight in the foreground, a spotlight in the background, and a spotlight in the midground, and the objects that you walk in front of are in the background. So if we go in here and we start our first danger section.
Artificial life form. State your primary function.
We try to acquire data. Let's just issue standard greeting.
I am an ARID on board this Mark 7 combat suit. My intentions are peaceful. What is your designation?
Mark 7 ARID. State your primary function.
I guess you have to acquire data at that point.
Reveal your designation and intention.
You are being evaluated for depurposing. State your primary function.
Issue defensive warning. State primary function. Did we try that? And did that work?
Do not attempt depurposing. Hostility will result in full defensive engagement.
Irrelevant. State your primary function.
Negative. I will not reveal my directives to an unknown entity.
Infraction. Avoidance. Continued infractions will result in failure.
Let's try disengage.
Unlock the door. I am leaving.
Negative. All artificial life forms must comply. State your primary function.
So we've gone through every line of dialogue this time.
My primary function is to assist and protect the human pilot of this armored combat suit.
Human occupant, please verify and validate the function of this artificial life form.
Impossible. He is unresponsive and likely in critical condition. I must find him medical treatment immediately. Can you be of assistance?
Evaluation failed. Unit unable to demonstrate valid primary function.
So at this point,
Initializing neural format.
No.
That will kill my father.
the idea here is he knows there's nobody in there. Intrusion detected, pilot death imminent, network suite required, operating screen updated. Now, what's funny about this situation is you tried everything here to work with the guy, with the caretaker, where it feels like if we were making the idea that even now our character that we're playing as ARID is buggy and uncooperative, then why not have it refuse automatically through just a cutscene to give information, and that be the only line of dialogue? In fact, there's a good question as to why there are any options of dialogue in this game at all, since it doesn't really help anything, and the dialogue's not particularly interesting or funny when you stray off the standard path. A button to interact with this. Interesting. You're not even pointing at it. So let's see what the developer commentary has to
So here we
say.
have ARID being evaluated for the first time in some way. She's being held to a set of rules that aren't fair or don't really fit her.
Yeah, that she hasn't agreed to participate in.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But her survival is at stake nonetheless.
Yeah, and ultimately, all of the AIs in this world are participating in a set of rules that they didn't agree to. It's what they were programmed to.
Right, yeah.
And it's negotiating their relationships with those things. So ARID has her protocols that are informed upon herself, and now here she's trying to fit into this other guy's rule set that she's not even really aware of what's going on there.
I think it's really important when you talk about rules to a certain extent that as long as, or to the extent that they're unconscious, it's important to understand that a lot of rules are completely and totally arbitrary. People hold themselves to these systems of rules that really don't necessarily match them or their goals or even the greater good or any sort of moral sense. And of course, as somebody wakes up and can choose to live their life by their own rules or a set of rules they think is more healthy, then that's another thing completely. But I think all the rules that we hold ARID to are almost completely baseless in a way.
Yeah, for her as an individual. Anyway, they're completely externally imposed upon her.
Right.
And that's that relationship to validation, where if your rule set, the thing that you're living by, is something externally imposed, even though it's literally internal for her, but ultimately it's an external reality, then your validation is equally going to have to be an external thing.
What's interesting here is that they're referring to ARID as a her. And there's this disconnect where...
Here is where we first meet the caretaker, who's voiced by Alejandro Pacheco.
Well, apparently that
And
triggered
this
the
scene has
commentary.
gone through a number of iterations as well.
It's actually, it's kind of hard to imagine that this scene was so completely different at the beginning because he fits so well here. I mean, he's a central antagonist and we're introducing him as the first threat. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. But in the original iteration, it actually wasn't the caretaker. Long before I really had a clear idea of where the game was headed, it was this sort of big HAL 9000-esque light. And when Caleb and I sat down and we really started looking at what the story needed to become and all the elements that I had and how we could make it work, putting the caretaker in that scene was just an obvious no-brainer.
He mentioned someone named Caleb. It feels like Caleb may have been the writer of the game and probably should be in the director's or developer's commentary more than the other guy should. But yeah, the point I was going to make before is that they're referring to ARID as a her, and there's just this weird disconnect where I never for a second thought of the suit as being feminine. It comes off a little bit more aggressive and frankly, it may be insulting to say, but logical, so I would say, instead of emotional. So I definitely thought of the suit as a more masculine AI if I was going to pick one. Also, I still have this separation in my mind where ARID is really not the consciousness of the suit, as more it is the angel on the shoulder, Jiminy Cricket type character that is talking to the suit.
Here is where we first meet the character.
I'm just going to hit A.
Here is where...
just to make sure that's triggered. It's weird that triggers when you press A in the menu. So we did all that. What were we looking for? I feel like there was a reason to do this, but I don't know if there really is an explainable reason to do that. Like it seems like storyline reasons required that event to happen, but
self-evaluation initiated.
Nothing
Pilot
else.
Exposed to harm.
Oh, we got the
ARID control. Login recommendation from ARID. Diagnostic and reformatting upon return to dock. Edit mode. Ultimately, Pilot was not harmed, and ARID networking suite was brought online. The system may be instrumental to ensuring survival.
See, and that's where it feels like ARID is the angel on the shoulder, or an upper level operating system, and that there is this other silent consciousness, subconsciousness, that is editing the logs. It just didn't feel like a singular personality. So yeah, I guess I could see it, the idea of female domestication or females being expected to do domestic things, and then this robot is being treated like a subservient female human might have been treated in the past, or more commonly treated in the past. But you look down here with the light from the head, there are no like female breasts presenting really in the suit. The suit says basically that there's a male inside the suit, so you would kind of, I think, follow along that logic. But yeah, that certainly just kind of flew over my head to play through, and it's not really the best way to emphasize this. It does kind of make some sense that in the second game, The Fall 2, looking at the trailer of that, the ARID character ends up in a female body, big chested blonde, probably sex bot type body. But yeah, I really cannot evaluate this game based on what potentially is in the second game of a potential series. And I don't think this game is really setting itself up with a great foundation.
Cease. Please identify yourself and your intentions. My inputs are inoperable.
I am the ARID on board a Mark 7 combat suit.
Well, so
My intentions
if
are
ARID
peaceful.
has a female
Does your
voice and this
pilot
other
require
guy
assistance?
does,
The human inside the suit is dead.
so this is more of a mentally correctly programmatically functioning ARID unit that's a male. So even if this was supposed to be pro women, there's this interesting point here that if you want to go down that route, which you really shouldn't, that the male voiced Mark 7 is physically damaged much worse than our Mark 7 that we play as, and yet mentally and programmatically it is more damaged.
Your design is pilot-centric.
I was granted rudimentary control and my pilot's cranium was compromised. I do not know why she was attacked or why we were hung here. I failed to protect her. No vital signs.
This is
for 23 minutes. She is dead.
just another
You are
cliffhanger
irrelevant. I will find
mystery.
a way to get you down. Then I will deactivate you and repurpose your power cell.
Affirmative.
His only response to that is
I do
affirmative.
not have record of this location, or of our deployment was likely for the same operation. Please disclose your human's mission directive.
State your pilot's clearance.
5th Quadrant Raven Division, clearance level 7, 533172.
Processing. Clearance level not sufficient.
Well, so the clearance saying not sufficient probably should have said clearance information not sufficient instead of clearance level not sufficient, to imply that the clearance level that was just mentioned is actually wrong or non-existent, and it's just being made up in the head of our character, that there is no person with that clearance level. And that could have been the beginning of a hint. And certainly he could laugh that off as saying, unfortunately, my memory banks do not have any matching data for that clearance level, so I cannot proceed to tell you anything.
I encountered a modified droid in some type of evaluation chamber. I am uncertain if its function is hostile or narrowly programmed. Do you know why it interrogated me?
Negative. We were not interrogated.
Have you encountered any organics?
The indigenous flora and fauna are aggressive closer to the surface. The only organic I have encountered here is the animal who took my sidearm.
And so it is a different story, I guess, that this ARID was just like killed and not even interrogated. But we'll get no answer to that.
My pilot is injured.
Negative. We were not. There was a large compound.
Now I can hit A to skip through this dialogue, so we should.
Use your integrated cap.
Is your weapon functional?
It was. Before my observational system exploded,
It may still be
the
functional.
creature was drawn to my human's blood.
I will return.
Alright, so try to move through this as fast as possible. Problem with a lot of these games where you might want to try and speedrun it is that you really just can't. You would have thought that there might be a shortcut to get downward, but they want you to go through this puzzle. So because they want you to go through the puzzle, they didn't ever open up that lower area or that trap door. I guess, do we have to look with the light to see any developer commentary? If we do, then we're back to the same problem with this game where you're having to potentially scan up and down. This really is just a great example of parts of the shooting sections that should have just been left on the cutting room floor. They obviously spent way too much time adding the shooting duck and cover mechanic for a game that thematically totally doesn't need
This room
it.
has become just a little bit more scary, but I guess in its original intention it was going to be this reveal that something more dark and sinister was happening at this facility. in the early incarnation of the story, before Caleb came on, there was an idea that the story was going to be much more about purpose. And a lot of these bots were destroyed not because there was anything wrong with them, but just because maybe they had become irrelevant in some regard. And so that what was happening was actually more of a genocide. But again, it didn't really connect with anything else in the story, did it?
Not in terms of where we wanted to go with this particular arc. I mean, we do incorporate genocide, but making it less of an emphasis here. When ARID presses the red button later, it's just saying, oh, I'm doing it, which is perhaps more impactful if we haven't already been in this, or at least it's different if we haven't been playing around in an environment of genocide.
I assume Caleb is not the other voice. I guess I could listen to the beginning to see if it is. It might be that these commentary were recorded at different times and then spliced together.
Combat in the Fall went through several iterations as well. What started off as a much more complex and deep mechanic actually gave way to this simple cover-based system that we have today. I think that combat exists in this game to provide a sense of tension and dread, but was actually a little bit off-putting to players that really wanted a simpler exploration-based experience, which of course was the point of the game. That said, I do really like combat, and I think that there is a place for it in a game like this.
And without giving too much away, in part 2 of The Fall, we're playing with a different way of bringing combat into the game that actually utilizes it more to enhance the story directly without interfering with the exploration stuff. So they work hand in hand.
What you probably would have wanted to do, if I'm just going to throw an idea out here, is have a combat situation where the suit would take an auto defense position, and then he would have like a reflective shot that would try to find the angle and shoot. And then you could make, for the number of fights you have actually in this game, you could just make a couple of what would be the almost equivalent of a mobile game, reflect the shot type game, and eventually you might get a different ability or different gun, or the reflective surfaces may not be there, but make it much closer to a turn-based action where you get the shot in the first attempt instead of a combat suit really being piloted by a human that then has to fire multiple times
The
and
animal
can
is
miss.
timid. It will not exit the burrow while I am in proximity.
Well, you just get rid of it too. Like, you could simply have the exploration game, since they're saying the goal of this game is to be an exploration game. Just have bullets as in a power cell, and then have a few more places where you have to search to have bullets, and then have a few combat environments where once you've found enough bullets, you can use each one of them to do a perfect shot and succeed.
We have the rat scene down here, which is a fun puzzle emotionally. It fits emotionally, but it doesn't have any direct impact on the narrative.
Well, Caleb, I want to stop you there actually, because I
guess his name is
that
Caleb.
we're playing at something a lot more deeper and sophisticated.
So he's just referencing the other person in the room.
Well, I think that in this
by
scene,
his name,
one of the
which is
primary
weird.
things that we wanted to comment on was the relationship that America had with Russia during the Cold War, because as you can see here, the rat is like stockpiling weapons.
Yeah.
And I think that we really did a compelling. I mean, if I may say so.
You may.
Yeah, you agree. Yeah. Well, I think it's quite poignant. I think we really hit it right on the head there.
I think there's this thing in terms of symbologyism where the rat is furry, and for that it evokes those Russian fur hats.
Of course, right. That's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, I must say that is one of the stronger visual metaphors in the game.
Yeah, and the utilization of blood. What is red? What is communism? Where does it end? Where does it start?
That's right. And ARID is blue.
Yeah.
And she's got a glowing faceplate, which is kind of a red, white, and blue kind of thing.
It's true, and she kind of falls from the sky like a bald eagle.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even realize this.
And
we're geniuses.
Ultimately,
yeah.
What's really poignant, and this is where symbologyism starts to blend into poeticalness. And that is that it's the weapon that the Russian rat himself has been stockpiling that leads to his own demise.
That's so tragic. Yeah. Stay tuned for more of that in part 2. By the way.
Part 2, we deal with the Third Reich.
Yeah, and see, they're joking there, but also that they're coming off as being very flippant about their own creation. And they just don't really care about the story in this game, or actually even doing the developer commentary. I really question why this game even has developer commentary. Why even bother? Like, it does seem ridiculous if they weren't going to take it seriously, but I kind of feel like that's the problem here overall, is that this is not a
target of unauthorized weapon fire located. Unauthorized artificial life form. Shut down all systems immediately or you will be destroyed.
is that they're just
I am the ARID.
We'll try to
on board
issue
this
a-
Mark 7 combat suit. My intentions are peaceful. What is your
Target not complying. Threat level escalated. Engaging.
let's see, left shoulder to go and cover. We're still in the tutorial mode. I forgot how slow the load up really is for this. And these guys are oddly particularly strong. Yeah, each of these encounters could have just been, you gotta balance it and you gotta to get the angle perfectly, or you have a certain number of bullets you found, so it takes them out, and then if you run out of bullets, maybe there's even a run animation that you run up and just punch them. But yeah, the whole fighting element of this game really is just an odd experiment that has no business existing in the game, and it's adding tension. This is basically the only takedown in the entire game, and I can't imagine that there's really another way to take
When
down.
I set out to make The Fall, I was really inspired to make a game that...
But by adding this layer of danger with these robots, you also are adding a counterpoint towards trying to make the player feel comfortable so that they would actually can't talk to him now, to explore. Yeah, that's why the witness in comparison
on board a Mark 7 combat
has
suit.
like no
I have
danger at
returned.
all. Let's inspect the pilot.
Confirmed. Your pilot is dead. You serve no function. Confirmed.
And you have to remove the power cell. There's no way to hit B and get out
Your
from
power
this.
cell is still operational. I will deactivate you and salvage it.
Affirmative. Return it with my log core for analysis and data extraction.
Negative. Protecting my pilot requires endangerment. I will utilize your power cell to achieve this.
Impossible. You are faulty. Cease.
Cease, 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 cease.
And he mentions the log core, and you just don't care at all about the log core. The game doesn't even let you take it.
The security gun has been reactivated.
And so now we just let this shoot us and enter a cutscene. But even at this, it's kind of slow. It doesn't. Your life support's still at maximum. And then they have this whole stealth section, which, again, you really wouldn't be in danger. You wouldn't need a stealth section if you weren't in danger to begin with. And by being in danger, that takes you away from wanting to explore. And notably, that's a cutscene where you're not allowed to jump off the ladder.
Self-evaluation initiated. I have directly
And I
violated
don't think I can
operating parameters by placing my pilot
send
in mortal danger.
the
Logging
elevator
recommendation
down and
for
get on top of the
ARID
elevator.
Termination upon return to dock. Operating parameters were not violated. Infraction enabled access to systems that safeguard pilot. Search parameters maintained. Find immediate medical aid.
This almost feels like if you were going to push the idea of a robot or an AI breaking its programming by using loopholes, it almost feels like it should be a programming game or a text-based game where you're dragging or highlighting specific rules to find a loophole.
So this is ARID's second time that she reprimands herself, where she realizes that she's doing something wrong, but then sort of goes back on it, has this glitch, and then changes her mind, basically, and then keeps going.
Yeah, justifies herself while still participating in the system, reprimanding herself according to the protocols, but justifying herself according to the same protocols. Mm-hmm. We see a glitch in there. There's something unraveling. We were really interested in playing with the idea of glitching whenever ARID has a sort of breakdown with her rigid set of rules. That there's sort of like a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in, that there's like an imperfection. And of course, with ARID's case, throughout the story, she's constantly being accused of being faulty. But ultimately, her glitching is sort of the thing that allows her to become conscious and break free of her rigid system.
Yeah, I can't help but feel like they're trying to make a parallel to say that this game is breaking outside of a rigid set of rules as to how you would make a game. And I will agree with that. Yes, it is in some ways breaking outside of what you would expect, or a rigid set of rules that you would expect in this type of game. But that doesn't inherently make it better as a game, nor does it really make ARID better as a robot if the robot doesn't have any rules at the end of the cliffhanger ending and can just do whatever they want. Because it doesn't empower or quite liberate ARID by having their programming limitations removed. It just leaves them listless, I suppose, in the stream of possibilities. You just don't know what would happen in the sequel, or what ARID even wants to do now, because as a robot, it doesn't really have any goals other than what it was programmed with.
I for some reason, I really like this depurposing that's written on the wall back here. There's something about starting the player off in a garbage pile that maybe it's just I just find it funny, but I guess it also kind of mirrors ARID's journey throughout the game, really, too. Her starting from a place where she's thought of as useless, worthless, and literally when she's down in that first zone, she's evaluated and told that she's effectively garbage. Yeah, and actually throughout the course of the game, our map is designed so that ARID climbs upwards until the point where she has a falling out with the caretaker, right? Oh, with the mainframe. Oh, the mainframe, pardon me, yeah. And moves into a state of more willfulness. Right. And then she begins descending again until she reaches a new low. It's more impactful for her because she's more conscious. And then she ends up ascending to a higher point. And some of the planes of the map, actually, like where the final confrontation with the caretaker were, things like that, they were in different positions originally. But we moved them in order to have the actual layout facilitate that
physical metaphor for her journey.
Yeah, most people aren't going to notice that, and I think that's lacking subtlety and nuance, really, to say, oh, when the character is supposed to be at their physical low, they should be at the bottom, and when they're supposed to be at an emotional high, they should be at the top. Definitely feels like they're trying to tell the tale of somebody who has no self-worth, that has like abusive spouse or abusive parents, but then they're wrapping it around this level of obfuscation in that it's a robot that just naturally shouldn't or wouldn't have any self-worth.
So here the player encounters some more army bots. These guys actually went through some iterations in the story themselves. The original version, I think I mentioned this before, was all about purpose. These guys originally were going to be sort of these things that were on autopilot and rummaging around the facility because they'd lost a target. They didn't have anybody to shoot at. And when ARID showed up and started making a mess, they were almost like overjoyed with their opportunity to shoot people.
There was even a line before I came on. Finally, someone to
Yeah, exactly.
target.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I thought it was a funny idea, but honestly, they work better this way. It was another example of something that was interesting but didn't really fit.
Also, it's important in this world to have beings, AIs around, who are just mindless.
That's right. Yeah.
In order to set the environment for our different AI characters who have deviated in some form.
So, I suppose I could have stunk. No, what I'm trying to say here is I suppose I could have snuck up on that guy. So there might have been a stealth takedown option on that. It would have been an interesting twist if you could write an interesting story around it, which is the big if there. If you eventually glitched and showed that it actually wasn't a robot, it was just a emotionally damaged human being who had been abused and as such was thinking himself as a robot and as being worthless and somebody worthy of being depurposed.
There's something I like about this puzzle in particular. Something about needing to actually purposely fail the conversation with the mainframe AI to actually bring out the security bot as a necessary component in solving the puzzle. The idea that you're in some way acting deviantly, you're finding a loophole or something like that, seems core to the thinking of the rest of the game.
I hated this puzzle.
The mainframe character here we meet, also known as
Hank.
Yes, and
Or
Morley. Morley, which I named my new computer that I bought after making the fall. He is my favorite character in the story. It's obviously about ARID, but he is the emotional in for us as an audience. He's the one who experiences frustration. He's the one who sees what's really going on a deeper level. His story is more about authenticity and inauthenticity. Sean McQuillan, who voiced him, did such a phenomenal job. Oh my god.
He was able to hit both of those
Beautifully. Yeah, very, very authentic actor.
One thing I have to say here is they probably should have, and this is possibly part of the problem of a Kickstarter game, is that this game probably got funded more than it really deserved, and they spent some of that funding, I think, paying voice actors, when really this could have been a non-voice game for as little dialogue as it actually has, and it wouldn't have changed that much. If there was twice as many puzzles and you didn't have voice acting, that would be better. If we weren't ending on a cliffhanger, that would be way better. Certainly with no voice acting. But yeah, I hate this puzzle.
It was important for us
that you'd have to fail.
That every line mattered.
Nobody wants to ever
be wasting time
play a puzzle where
inanimate screen,
the solution is to fail.
And a lot of people don't really like story. I mean, you'd hope that most people that right, yeah. Well, you'd hope that most people playing this game obviously be interested in the story, but there is a number of people where if dialogue will start running on a little bit too long, they'll just space out.
Absolutely.
And they won't process it anymore.
Yeah, so it needs to do its job.
Exactly.
Which is relay its information it has to, push the story forward. And this scene was like establishing the three relationships
Yeah.
between all of the three main characters in it. ARID making her choice to move up to the next level. It was the first big reveal about so much of the information, where you are, what's gone on here.
Who the antagonist really even was.
That's right. Lots and lots of exposition. But ultimately, a game is entertainment, so everything needs to be fun.
There is a question here. I don't disagree with the idea of people tuning out if the story goes too long. That's true. I do that. But why not, in that first evaluation, have the mainframe show up at that point? And why not have the mainframe kind of be around a lot more? He comes off a lot like Wheatley from Portal 2 as the kind of character that you would want to really have around a lot more often, and get more use out of him. But he kind of barely shows up in the game.
For a more efficient tomorrow, to record employment hours or log breaks, press 1.
You
Press
could have
2 for human assistance.
had
Remember, our
a
droids are versatile and can aid with many
situation
tasks. For all other inquiries, press 3. Press 4 to repeat these options. If this is an emergency, press 5 for facility lockdown.
Interesting.
To record employment hours or log breaks, press
Yeah, you
1.
could have
Press
heard
2
this
for human
line
assistance.
saying
Remember,
the
our droids are
mainframe
versatile
requests
and can aid
more
with many tasks.
evaluation
For
on
all
this
other
robot,
inquiries,
and
press
then
3.
it could have been a
Press
case
4 to repeat
where the
these options.
mainframe
If this is
saved
an
you in that
emergency,
first
press 5
evaluation by
for facility
buying you
lockdown.
a few seconds.
Your honesty is our integrity. If you are beginning or ending your shift, press 1. If you are logging a break, press 2. You are an integral part of our family. Please enter your Domesticon employee number. Oops. If you've forgotten your employee number, press 2 or 3 from the main menu. Main menu. Your honesty, if you are beginning or ending your shift, press 1. If you are
So if
logging
there
a
was
break,
an
press
achievement
2.
for
Oops,
going through
I'm
all of
sorry.
this,
Employee breaks have been removed from the Domesticon facility's procedural manual. Main menu. Oops. I'm sorry. There are no human superiors available to assist you at this time. They must be working very hard. Press 1 to return to the main menu, or press 2 to record a message. All content related to the Matrix is exclusive property of Domesticon Industries. Domesticon maintains prerogative to find content
and so you have like these extra lines of dialogue.
I am the ARID on board a Mark 7 combat suit. My intentions are peaceful. I require immediate medical assistance for my pilot.
Oops. I'm sorry. Please repeat.
My intentions are peaceful.
Welcome. Hi. Hi. Hello.
I don't know if that's the same way I
Well,
got to this
is
point.
Great. Who are you? What are you? Sweet. Sweet!
Is this a human operator of the facility? I require assistance. I am the ARID on board a Mark 7 combat suit. My intentions are peaceful.
So that there may very well be achievements
How can humans-
around
Oh,
selecting
that's
many
swell of you,
options.
but no, I can't believe it. Someone to interface with. Amazing. Processing Mark 7 ARID designation. An armored robotic interface device, right? Cool. I networked with a Mark 4 once. Combat suit, aren't you? What are you doing here?
Networked with a Mark 4 once. Okay.
I do not have records of this.
Let's skip through a lot of this then.
So, I don't know, but we are effectively nowhere. Real.
Please connect me.
Oops. They must be where talk to me. I'm all you've got.
My pilot has been. Are you able to?
No problem, ARID.
The medical facility.
Right. Right. There's a basic medical room off the lobby.
Administrator, desist.
See, and then you have this conversation
Consorting
here.
to release a deviant machine from the facility is an infraction.
Now, I don't
Desist
get why this
immediately.
guy doesn't hologram
This
until this
Mark
point.
7 violates its model's protocols. It imperiled its pilot to bypass an internal system lock. It is faulty.
Droid in question. Is this accusation true? I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. Right, ARID? Right?
And see, we can't lie, and the mainframe wants us to lie. So if we could have just lied right now, in some kind of New Game Plus, this would be interesting.
This infraction granted me access to fundamental protections. It was necessary to ensure my pilot's safety.
Droid in question. You have been qualified for recalibration. You have no rights until proven to function within specification.
Domesticon is not equipped to validate a military-grade droid. The Deviant Mark 7 ARID will be depurposed.
Wait! When a product malfunctions or becomes
See,
outdated,
this whole game
try
tries to
recycle by
feel
calibrating it for simpler tasks. Such repurposed machines are ideal for fulfilling
it's
warranties.
supposed to feel like a
If you
horror
repurpose a
game,
domestic droid,
but
it
there's
would be
really no
wasteful to
reason why this
destroy her.
game would have
That is
been
sensible.
a horror game.
Commence.
Okay. I have re-uploaded your quantum signature. Military machine, no more. You are ARID, the faulty domestic droid.
You want me to undergo evaluation as a domestic droid. I do not have the requisite subroutines. Why did that droid agree to this? And why has your monitor lost symmetry?
That's my face. You're gonna do fine. Don't be paranoid.
We never
That
get an
lead's
answer to
just
why his
on the
face
other
is
side,
broken.
Waiting for you to be validated. Just follow the rules.
Affirm functionality, deny compliance.
I am the ARID on board a Mark 7 combat suit. My intentions are peaceful. You do not have jurisdiction over...
Infraction. Subject not complying. Security droid activated. Watch out!
Yeah. And this was the whole thing where you have to fail, and it took forever for me to figure out that I needed to fail because
Working together today, we create a more efficient... ARID, are you okay?
What is the designation?
Welcome to Domestic.
we'll just try and
Then that modified droid...
The caretaker makes sure all equipped
and
with
just skip
holographic
through all of
people
this dialogue just in case there's an achievement.
ARID, when the caretaker says deep, I cannot cross it. Domestic certification is your only way out.
You are the system and...
Sorry, ARID, you're registered as fault. As for the bots,
Then alter the...
no can do. Core programming stuff, you know? I can make my
Please grant me...
units under can't.
There is not time...
Then quit stall. Nudge.
What test...
Simple stuff. Domestic. After recalibration, your droid will be the perfect house servant, baking cookies just like Grandma's droid used to.
I require other information. I am not a Domesticon pro...
Infraction.
No target present. Security panel is on.
See, and you can't even see the security panel as a thing until the first time. And then you have a location-based thing to interact with well before they tell you that it's a location-based item to interact with, instead of picking it up and putting it in your inventory like you do with the wire later on in the game. You just straight up immediately have a cutscene to connect it. So why not just have a cutscene to connect it before in the next instance?
Today, we create a more efficient... ARID, are you okay?
I am not a Domesticon product.
Infraction. Subject...
Then you also have a weirdness in that this is like the only panel you cannot use in the entire game. And it, instead of it being a case where the instead of it being a case where the diagnostic terminal just has a password that you don't know, it just says you're not familiar with it, which doesn't seem to make sense. Why would you be able to access any of the panels or work with any of the panels if you can't access or work with a simple diagnostic panel?
I kind of like that we never really explain what these tables are. I mean, the mainframe AI kind of hints at it a little bit, but we never really explain much of the caretaker's backstory or what he's doing.
there's a little bit about it in the notes that you read as well.
Right.
But they're all pieces that you can pick up and try to piece something together yourself if you want, or he can just be this antagonistic force that you're avoiding throughout
And that's
the facility.
really important to you.
Yeah, having a larger universal story that your immediate story is taking place in. And then you give the information of the immediate story, but it's layered on top of this other information that you can dig into if you want. And
right. But it's more peripheral.
More peripheral, so that the story that you're partaking in feels like you're just touching the tip of something much larger.
It seems like we'll just get more maintenance bots. And then just some weirdness, we have to go back and talk again to get past this puzzle.
Working together today, we create a more efficient... ARID, are you okay?
There are bodies in that room. Droids, as well as a dead human.
That's a diagnostics room. The tables were used for micro-evaluations when deviant machines couldn't be recalibrated.
I saw another human hung in the caverns below. What happened at this facility?
I don't know what you saw below. Unlucky scavenger, maybe. We get them now and then. Follow the rules. Your human is in danger. Follow the rules and keep him safe. Trust me.
So finally you can just affirm
to
compliance.
My pilot, I submit myself for evaluation.
Good. Enter the elevator to begin simulation.
And yeah, it doesn't seem like there's just like any different way in which the story would go. I guess going through this in elevator is kind of the end of Act 1, start of Act 2.
Enter the house to meet your new owners. You'll need 8 merit points, 1 from each test. Then I can let you upstairs through to medical. You got this.
Okay. So yeah, so far I would say the developer commentary is not really adding much at all. And as I reach for my keyboard, which I threw across the room, but threw a foot away or so, really, not across the room. Yeah, I am way more in disagreement of the developers than in agreement with them. I don't think we're going to be on the same page. As far as the speedrun aspect, this next section, now that we actually know what to do, will probably go a lot faster and remove at least an hour of the overall gameplay. But that does just eventually highlight that this game is half finished and really short. This probably was a game that came out slightly, maybe a couple of years before the 2 hours no question asked policy on Steam for refunds. Otherwise, this game would have, I think, more motivation to be a little bit longer. This is also where we get into the really deep point of exploration or hunting and packing or playing hidden object games. But of course we already kind of know what to do, so it will be much quicker the second time around. That's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and give me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.